Welcome back again to He's a Giant, a pod about boy summer. I am your host, Sal, with my co-host, Monty, fresh off the Knicks victory tonight at the Garden to go up 2-0 on those bum bastards from Philly. Fuck Philly. Let's go, Knicks. What's up, Monty?
What's up, man? Just checked. We are officially live on YouTube. It's working this time. Glad to have you guys here. Glad to have everybody coming off a high of a Knicks victory and happy to celebrate Fatboy Summer.
Yes, sir. We got a fun episode today. We're going to be going over the beginnings and ends of the creation of Fatboy Summer, the origins, the story, the whole bit. And we are going to get into the Giants depth chart as it's beginning to take shape. So let's get right into it. We are live. Thank you guys for being here, as always. And for those who are, let me see how many people are here. Well, you guys know what you got to do. Hit the like button, subscribe, share the pod on YouTube, share the pod on Twitter, whatever your streaming media is of choice. So the Giants, last time we were here, Monty, a week ago, had just signed Shelby Harris, coming fresh off the draft. And we were wondering, when are they going to fill that zero tech, that nose tackle position? We've been frustrated hearing stories about how DJ Reader is expected to sign. DJ Reader is supposed to sign. Joe Shane dropping his name. Weeks went by. We're waiting and we're like, what the hell is going on here? But finally, after all of the waiting, yesterday, DJ Reader did sign a 2-year deal with the Giants. How are you feeling about it, man?
I'm happy, man. I think it's the last piece we desperately needed. I don't know what we were gonna do if we didn't get DJ Reader. I know you were trying to spin zone some ways to be happy about this, but I think it was the obvious ad. I don't know why it took so long, but I'm glad it got done. I'm glad it ended up being a 2-year deal. I don't know if that's what the Giants wanted to do, but but that's what I'm happy. I'm happy that we have him for another year. Yeah, I think he's an above average starter, and I think he's going to be an above average starter, at least average, for like the next 2 years, and buys you a little bit time to get your succession plan for DJ Reader. You can see what you're getting out of Darius Alexander. You bring in Shelby Harris. I'm happy. I think the D line's in a good spot, given you just traded away, the anchor of your defense.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are people who are trying to spin it and say, well, are the Giants gave up Dex, but look at what they got. They got Shelby Harris and TJ Reader and Francis Mauigoa. I'm like, yeah, that's a really disingenuous way to look at it. Which would you rather have? Honestly, I'd rather have Dex. But yeah.
But we were talking about adding them before then. So it's like,
right, we wanted to get those guys here with Dex. The one thing you can say is by trading Dex, you were able to add both Arvel Reese and Francis Mauigoa. Now that's the way to look at it. Like, and that's the proper way to be happy about things.
Mauigoa is the X factor here. We'll see what Mauigoa had. And look, I mean, the reality is, and we kind of talked about this going in the draft, where I was not as high in going interior defensive lineman right away in the second round, is because, I mean, I guess I was talking about more wide receiver and corner, because I do think there is good interior line out there, but I don't know if they were going to address interior line anymore if they didn't, get a guy through the draft. So, I think you did a good job of addressing it through D-line, addressing it through free agency, but we desperately needed another interior offensive lineman. We got it.
We got that. And we knew we needed D-line help. And as day 2 of the draft rolled around, it became clear, and I think the Giants did a good job with it, that, the value at the top of the second round was really in the cornerback room. I think they did the right thing and took the guy who they thought was the best player in Colton Hood, and looks like a starting corner, hopefully, for them for years to come. And they played it out. They didn't force anything with the D-line. And admittedly, this was not a great D-line draft class. There were some very good players, but it wasn't the kind of class where if you missed out, you felt like you missed out on, truly earth-shattering talent. There were some good players, but they didn't force it. But the net result of that was, in addition to drafting Bobby Jamison Travis in the 6th round, who we're going to get to tonight, you had to add veterans. Specifically just to get the players on the depth chart, but mainly because I think what Denard Wilson really wants from D linemen is guys who can two gap and stop the run so the rest of his defense can flow. So that was, I think, the critical part of adding a guy like Shelby Harris, who does that very well. And obviously adding DJ Reader, who's sort of the centerpiece of it all. He's your starting nose tackle. I think you can expect him to play approximately 60% of the snaps at nose. He's not going to do the 80%, 90% thing the Giants got used to doing with Dexter Lawrence. Yeah. Nobody does that. That's crazy. I think they were doing it with Leonard Williams as well, if I recall. It was just a really woeful way to like handle the D-line room. You know, the best teams with the best players do rotate these guys. The top guys are usually in the 70s, not in the 80s.
Well, they normally have depth.
They have depth. They're starting behind them. Giants haven't had depth, but now they do, right? I think when you look at what they've done in the D-line room, they've kind of slowly just added people. They added a bunch of guys. We didn't even mention Lecky Fatu, Sam Roberts. I know these guys are not household names, but they're guys who can play. They're guys who can stuff the run and be situational, you know, rotational type D linemen, and they're adding them to the room and just going forward. They also picked up Zach Pickett off waivers yesterday. The former, I want to say he was a second round pick, maybe an early third round pick. I can't recall exactly.
Something like that. Yeah,
from third, I think. Carolina. Yeah, he was an athletic freak from South Carolina. You know, pretty gifted one gapper, has traits, has burst, good first step, but you know, never had a great anchor in college. And I think, and he was kind of exposed with that problem with the Bears. And then he bounced to the Chiefs, didn't play much, got placed on waivers. And I think the Giants are swinging on the athletic upside here. I think he ran like a 4.8 or something at 300 pounds, which is kind of impressive. So there's some athletic testing profile they probably enjoyed here, but the point is they're throwing bodies at the problem, and they do have some quality veterans now that we can work with to start to run Denard Wilson's defense.
Yeah, Ryan Poles masterclass with that pick, but yeah, man.
I had the same draft class where they traded like pick 33 or whatever for Chase Claypool.
I think it was. Yeah, it was. I think. Great, Ryan Poles. But yeah, man. I'm excited to kind of go over these depth charts. We'll get into that because I think we're in a good spot, man. It's interesting to look at this, and side note, like on a related note, I saw something on Twitter today that was ranking all of the teams in the NFL by age. And I'm used to seeing the Giants. I'm like, where are the Giants? Because we're always like the youngest team in the NFL. And I'm looking, and we're like the fourth oldest. And I'm like, if my first reaction was like, ooh, like that's not good. And I'm kind of thinking about it, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I know we have good young pieces. That's not my concern. Like I know what we have as far as building blocks, but I kind of like that we finally have some veterans in this room fighting for jobs instead of just like these young guys who we're hoping break out and aren't anything. So maybe it'll be good to have some veterans on this team now.
Yeah, I mean, again, when you look at the age difference between like the youngest and the oldest team, it's like right. The average age is like a difference is like a year. And you think about who the Giants added. I mean, some of the guys they signed this offseason, you know, like older players, obviously, you know, Reader's an older guy. Harris is 34. They brought in, I mean, Mooney's older. They brought in some O-line depth guys who are a little older, you know, and so they brought in players who are older to help fill the holes on the roster. That's okay, right? Like none of these guys are here for long-term deals. I mean, 2 years, maybe 3 max for some of these guys. Like Pat Ricard is the only guy I think who's a little bit older that has like a multi-year deal. And I think his is 2 years. So I'm not too concerned about that. But I think the general idea of filling your holes on your roster with veterans while you draft to develop your future is the right way to go about it. The key is actually making sure the draft picks develop and getting the right draft picks and not, doing what Adam Peters did a couple of years ago, which is I think he started out really well as GM of the Commanders his first year. Obviously, his first pick was Jaden Daniels, but what he did in that offseason was he didn't overshoot. He just signed a lot of quality older veterans for cheap deals.
Set a culture,
had a lot of guys who can run Dan Quinn's defense and just some basic guys for the offense to help the young quarterback. Protected his draft picks, took a bunch of swings during the draft, added players to develop. They had one successful season, and then he just tossed it all to shit and just started trading away all his draft picks for veterans who were over the hill, trading away his draft picks for players who weren't going to be impactful, and now they're like, entering their third year without a plan. I don't want to see the Giants screw this up and take that approach, right? Even if they have a successful season this year. If you somehow eke out like a 10-win season or something like that this year, and you're in the playoffs, you make a little run, don't fall for it, right? Like, don't do dumb things like that. Like, protect your draft capital. You can still build through free agency smartly, but don't start throwing away your draft picks. I think that's a lesson that we want to take from the Adam Peters failures of the second year.
And it's not like, oh, well, these veterans worked for me, so I'm going to re-sign them for more money and keep them. It's no, that strategy worked. You brought in cheap veterans who were fighting for a job, brought them in, and they produced for you. And we talked about that going into free agency, where that it's kind of the ideal strategy, because we always go young. We go young because we can't draft. So we're like, oh, this guy shook loose. Maybe we got a first round grade on him. We had a second round grade on him. Let's pay him and try to see what he becomes. Basically every single time this guy's off the team within 3 years, and it's like, all right, so it's like, what was the point of going young here when I could have signed a 29-year-old player? They're good for 2 years and then they're off the team, and I just do it again and again for half the money.
Right. No, it makes no sense. I mean, you're only bringing them here for 2 years anyway. Who cares, right? Like, what that age is. You're not supposed to be worried about the age of the veterans you bring in for a couple of years. What you should be worried about is drafting the right players who are young and can develop, and you take the time to develop them. That's more important. So I think that's
our older player too.
Yeah, what is he, 27? I mean, he's not exactly like he's not aged, but yes, he's actually above that median age, right? So there's a bunch of guys like that they brought in.
Third contract guy though.
Right. I mean, certain positions, guys are good till they're about 30. I mean, D-line, they're good to their late 30s, So I don't you almost have to break it down by position group, and I don't really care. I think they've done a pretty good job, and I think it all kind of came together very nicely.
Yeah, somebody said like Sam Madison back in the day. Yeah, it's like that type of stuff, just bringing in good veterans to fill holes in teams. And I think it's a good strategy. And, but the trick to it is building through the draft. And I think we did a good start in that. I wish we had a little bit more draft picks here, but outside of that, I really liked what we came away with.
We belabored that point about trading draft.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that anymore.
We're not going to do it again. At the end of the day, I think we're pretty happy with the draft class they had, right? I think at least on paper, it's an exciting looking draft class, and I think they did a pretty good job, and we'll see how it pans out. They should protect their draft capital going forward. They should be collecting draft capital going forward. There are ways to do that. Players you might be able to trade, comp picks, but they should, manipulating the board, when they get there. But hopefully they find ways to get more swings. Anyway, that's the news, right? There's no other real news in Giants land. I mean, I think it's quiet right now. Rookie minicamp begins, I believe, this Friday. I think it's Friday to Saturday. And then in about 2 weeks, you have OTA start. So, we're heading into that part of the offseason where we're going from the personnel development side in terms of acquisition and going now into player development and coaching centric kind of stuff. And that's what I'm looking for in the next few weeks, because that's really the exciting part about having John Harbaugh here. It's not just the way he reshapes the organization, but at the end of the day, where he cut his teeth is being a great CEO head coach, implementing a plan with his coordinators and his assistant coaches on how to grind the players down, how to prepare them for football on Sundays from the beginning of camp all the way through game day. And we've heard over and over again that John Harbaugh is one of the hardest coaches to practice for in the NFL. He really works guys hard. He puts them to the test, and he wants them ready on game day. So I think we're going to start hearing those stories coming up. Another reason why it's good to have veterans. Just good to have veterans on your team who can help guide the younger guys. So I'm pretty excited about where we're headed here.
Yeah. So do you have anything else Giants you want to talk about, or should we get into the depth chart?
Let's get into the depth chart. So I think we're ready to go. So do you want to pull up? Can you pull up? I was going to use our lads. Is that what you use also?
Yeah, I could pull it up. Hopefully.
Yeah. If you can share it. I don't know. Sometimes it's tough to share their stuff, but I mean, we're going to use, for those who are using at home, a computer, laptop, whatever. I think personally, I think the best depth chart is the Our Lads depth chart. They tend to be the most accurate. And so I like using theirs. They also have historical depth charts for teams. You know, they can go back and archive NFL teams from different years. At any given time, they tell you where the players were on the depth chart. They also had to do it for college teams. So I think this is one of the things they do best. So I've always enjoyed their depth chart. But let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And what we want to do is go through the players we have, try to make it's a little bit early, but try to make some predictions about how we think this may shake out. But I think more importantly, how do you think with the players that we now have on each side of the ball in all three phases, actually, how do you think with the coaches we have, these players, this team is going to look and how they're going to play? So that's what we want to kind of get into. So let's start on offense, man. Obviously, quarterback, there's not much to say. Jackson Dart's our starting quarterback, and Jameis is our backup. They did sign Brandon Allen. I think that's actually an important one to mention. Just want to get it out of the way. Brandon Allen has been with Brian Callahan for years. I think he followed him from Cincinnati, right, to Tennessee. He is essentially like the Davis Webb variant, to Brian Dable,
Alex Tanney,
right. There are guys like him who follow the coach because they're extra coaches on the field. And I think I would view Brandon Allen as like an extra quarterback coach here to help Brian Callahan with Jackson Dart. So that's his role. He'll probably be the emergency quarterback. I don't know if he'll be active, but they'll probably keep him as an emergency quarterback. But I think he's an important person. I do think he makes this roster because of that role. Let's talk about, like, when you look at this holistically, big picture, give me an idea of how you feel, what group you want to start with, and we'll go from there.
All right. I mean, we talked quarterback, not too much go in there. I think we're both fans of Jackson Dart this year. I think we hope for a good sophomore year. Second year with Jameis as backup, comfortable with. But let's get into running back. Let's do running back next. So that was a position we talked about adding to all off season. There was the Kenneth Walker rumors, and really wasn't rumors. What we're talking about adding Jeremiah Love. Neither of those things happened. We basically are running it back with our running backs from last year, and we have Cam Scadaboo, Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, Eric Gray, and Dante Miller. So how do you feel about
and Damon Bankston, who we signed as a UDFA?
There you go. So how do you feel about that group?
Okay. I'm not thrilled with that group. I think you and I had this debate in going into the offseason that I really wanted to add another player to this room. I'm definitely not as high on Tyrone Tracy as everybody else is. He's a perfectly good player, but I think he's a more suitable running back 3. I get that he has the yardage the first 2 years, but I don't view him as like a dynamic playmaker in any way. Not to take anything away from him, but I think his best role is like what Devin Singletary has been the last couple of years as a running back 3. I was hoping we would sign a guy like Rico Dowdle. I thought he would have been a perfect complement here to Cam Scadaboo. I don't think Dowdle even signed for much, like $5 million or something like that. But I'm okay with it. I wish we could have had an upgrade. I know the Giants, I'm pretty confident they would have taken Jeremiah Love if he was there, honestly. I'm
glad he wasn't.
Right. I think you and I are both glad that they took Arvil Reese and Love wasn't. But I think just being realistic about the Giants, I suspect they would have taken him, if he was sitting there. And I think that's because they wanted to add a playmaker to this team, and he was the best playmaker in the draft. So I think the wild card here is this kid Bankston. Bankston is an interesting UDFA. One of the most dynamic kick returners in college. Had a few touchdowns and really exciting. I think, what did he play? New Mexico, I think, or New Mexico State, one of those schools. And he's a speed guy, right? I think he's what fans were hoping Turbo Miller would be, is this dynamic speed guy in the backfield who can be a weapon in special teams. And I think he is that. So he's one to watch out for in camp. He's going to get his opportunities in kick and punt return, I imagine. And he'll get some run with their team. But I think if you see him making plays on special teams, he can find his way onto the team And you should be rooting for that, I think, as a Giants fan, because you want dynamic playmakers like this to earn their way on the team through special teams. Because if they do, they're sitting on your bench during the game, and you may have a play designed for them, right? Where this guy has speed, he's explosive. You bring him in to try to do something and throw a change up at other teams. He's the one guy I think that can offer something different here. Not anything special, but I think he has a different skill set than the other. So I'm kind of excited about the prospect of that. But overall, I would say I'm just okay with the room. I'm not thrilled with it. I think it's good, not great. I like Cam Scatterbo a lot. I think Tracy is fine, but I wish there was something better here. That's how I feel.
So, I mean, I agree with you with what I was looking for. I was looking to add, a home run hitter. I don't think we really have that in this room, and Bankston could be that, but overall, I'm really happy with how they just kind of rolled back with the running back room. I didn't think it was something where we should have wasted resources on. I think that Cam Scatterbo deserves the chance to prove he can be an RB1. We'll see. I mean, obviously, we don't know how he's going to come off of that ankle injury, but all the reports seem to say that this is something he should recover well from and shouldn't be an issue for him. So if we get Cam Scatterbo that we saw last year, I think that he could be a true running back one. I think people are hesitant to give him that, but that's what he was producing at when he came in. He was producing like a true running back one when he played, and I feel like people are not giving him enough credit because he was a 4th round pick. But the reason he was a 4th round pick was because people didn't think his game would translate to the NFL. And I think he made it pretty clear pretty early that his game does translate and it does work. And, we see year after year, these guys who can, force missed tackles continue to translate to the NFL. And that's what Cam Scatterbo does. He's not your breakaway guy, but I think this is a guy who is phenomenal hands, for the record, a guy who's a great receiving back, a guy who can force missed tackles. I think this guy can be a 1,200 plus all-purpose yard guy, 10 plus touchdowns. I really think that is in the cards for Cam Scatterbo. If he can come back healthy off this ankle injury, I'm really excited.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You finish and I'll go.
Okay. I'm just saying I'm excited to see him. And then as far as Tyrone Tracy, I there's been a lot of negative talk about Tyrone Tracy, and I'm not the biggest Tyrone Tracy guy, but I don't know, like the guys, how many people have a guy who's had back-to-back 1,000 all-purpose yards as a running back too? I mean, I think saying he's a top 50 running back in the NFL, I don't think is that crazy a thing to say. And I'm pretty comfortable with him as my running back too, even though he's not, the dynamic complement your player guy. I think he's a very good option if Cam Scatterbo can't go.
Yeah, I think they're fine, and I think they'll be okay. I would agree that Cam Scatterbo was on a tremendous trajectory for what he is as a back, right? He was kind of an all-purpose back, power back, a lot, some ability to shake outside, get extra yardage. Obviously, the dude is just a bulldozer, knocks people over, forces a ton of missed tackles, and he forces them just by running into dudes and knocking them down. It's not an elusive trade. It's just, I'm going to run you over trade, and I love that about him. I actually think that because of his play style, his injury doesn't affect him the way it might a more explosive runner, right?
Yeah,
like I think the guys who are like the ankle flexion, like explosive burst guys, I think an ankle injury like that might have more of a negative impact on him, but it's not like that was his game. His game was more just grab the ball and, find a crease and just plow through shit. And I don't, as long as he heals up, I don't see that like being negatively affected too much.
Yeah. He's explosive, but he wasn't like bursty.
Right. So I think he'll be a good player. If he stays healthy, I think he's going to be a very solid player. I mean, to your point, he was on a really good pace when he went out. His yards after contact were solid. It was over 3 yards after contact, which is solid in the NFL. He had 22 missed tackles for us and just like 100 and something snaps, which is crazy. It's a very impressive kind of pace.
I think he even had more in the receiving game too.
Yeah, I mean that's just how he plays, right? No matter
Mhm.
however he gets the ball, that's just how he plays, and I think that there's a lot to like there. I think he's like a perfect running back too. If you had a dynamic playmaking running back one, not to say he can't be a running back one, but I just think if you had a dynamic running back one, I think Scadaboo as a two is just he's a menace. So we'll see how the year goes. Maybe he
Yeah.
proves to be everything that you think he can develop into, and then you're not having this conversation. But put it this way: I don't view this room as either a positive or a negative. I think it's an adequate room for now. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we'll see. Ultimately, we'll see. I'm glad Cam Scadaboo is getting the opportunity to prove what I think he can be. And I think that, the underrated aspect I've brought up too is there's just a different energy on this team when Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo are on the field together. Even with a hurt ankle, they're working out together constantly.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
real
I
thing.
I think that that's an aspect we can't underrate. And yeah, I mean, look, we'll see. I think that at the end of this year, we won't be talking about Cam Scadaboo as anything other than a running back one for us, but we'll
I
see.
I I really hope you're right. And I think we'll see. We'll see how it goes. If the opportunity came during the season to upgrade at running back somehow, however that may be,
Mhm.
I think they would not be opposed to it. I'll put it that way.
I think
Right,
there's
to
another
adding talent to the
prototype they can add to this room.
right. We'll see, and that's where like the kid, the rookie, for what it's worth,
Mhm.
um, I'm not opposed to seeing what he can do. Running back is one of those positions where like UDFA's can be impactful. It happens all the time where guys are UDFA's or seventh round picks and they can come in and be impactful as rotational backs. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But overall, this is not a room I'm worried about. Not at all. Actually, I'll be honest. There's not a lot of rooms I'm worried about with this team, which is
No.
going to be a theme we get to.
I
Like, can it improve? Yes, but am I worried about it? No, not really.
Yeah, and it's like even like look, I have a lot of hope in Cam Scadaboo. I'd be extremely disappointed if he went
Mhm.
down, but I have a lot of confidence that Tyrone Tracy can produce in an offense. I don't think our run game falls apart with Tyrone Tracy there.
Right. Let's go to tight ends. I mean, I don't think there's a ton to say here,
Mhm.
other than it got it got a big upgrade. Adding Isaiah Likely to this room added a pretty tremendous upgrade from what we had before, and we basically swapped out Daniel Bellinger for Likely. And I like Daniel Bellinger, but Likely is a far more dynamic playmaker. He's more of the big slot receiver prototype, which we didn't quite have at this level. He becomes tight end one. Theo Johnson becomes tight end two. I think that's
Mhm.
perfect. Theo Johnson,
Yeah.
I have my concerns with Theo as a tight end one. I don't think he's a tight end one. I think he's a very good, like all around tight end who can block, run routes, catch the ball at times. And as long as he's not asked to be a super high volume guy, I think he's perfect. And I think by getting Likely in here, you allow him to do that. And then
Mhm.
you have, a mixture of guys, Manhurts, Fedoni, Tanner Connor behind him as your tight ends 3, 4, 5. The question right now is how many tight ends do you think they're going to keep? Do you
Yeah.
think they keep 3 or 4? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it all shakes out in camp, but yeah, I think it's going to be tough for a guy like, Thomas Fedoni to make the team. He's Chris maybe Chris Manhertz is, a guy that they could take out. He always seems to make the team because he's a fantastic blocker, but he's a guy that despite making the team for that, they didn't really use last year. It could be completely different and probably will be a lot different under Harbaugh. But so maybe he brings more value. But yeah, I mean, overall, I like this room. I think that they played kind of the money ball technique going with Isaiah Likely while letting Wandale Robinson walk. I think that the idea is that he is going to be your second receiver essentially.
Yep.
I think that he will have a big role, obviously, as the connection to Harbaugh. I'm really excited about that ad. I think that that's a high upside ad. He finally gets to be the tight end one in the team. He's kind of been stuck behind Mark Andrews to this point. Uh, and yeah, Theo Johnson, I mean, look, there's been some positives of Theo Johnson for sure. I mean, he's a solid blocker. He has some of the really big, exciting plays. He has those like spectacular catches. He can work after the catch once in a while. But if you're depending on him, I think that's where you run into your issues. He has those drop issues. He's not going to be able to sustain those things that I talked about, but when he can do those things in bursts and make an impact here or there for your team, I think that's where he could bring value. And I think that's more of the tight end 2 role.
Right. And I think I mean, look, I think you touched on it. There's a little bit of overlap here with receiver, but Isaiah Likely, he fits that mold of player we've talked about a lot here on this pod, which is one of the cheat codes of the NFL is paying tight ends who can be receivers. Because on average, if you look at production, dollar for dollar, yard for yard, tight ends make about 50 cents on the dollar compared to their receiver counterparts. I mean, it's uncanny, right? Like they just get paid less for the same work. And so you have to pick the right kind of receivers, right? You need guys who can actually run a pretty decent route tree. That's likely. Guys who have the speed to get down the field and threaten the vertical plane. That's likely. Guys who can be big targets and work the slot as like a big slot. That's likely. Those guys are basically in that tier of like comparison to NFL slot receivers or even some Z receivers who are used primarily on the inside. And dollar for dollar, they make less than those guys, right? Like, so Isaiah Likely's making what, 13 million a year?
Yep.
It's like what Darius Slayton makes.
Yep.
Right. He's making around the same as Darius Slayton. So, like, who would you rather have on your team, Darius Slayton or Isaiah Likely? Who do you think is a more impactful overall player? I'm going to guess most people would say it's probably Likely, right? So I think you're getting good value there. And I do think that his addition to the room allows the Giants to be more flexible with how they constructed, and how they constructed the wide receiver room. He became your second target to Malik Neighbors in the passing game. So he's a big part of it. Now, the downside of Likely as well, he's, I think, a good run blocker. He's not a good inline tight end. That's not what he does.
He's a move blocker.
He is a move blocker. He's not someone you're going to line up at the line of scrimmage. And if you want to go heavy personnel sets and you want your extra man on the line of scrimmage to be a tight end, he's not going to be able to do that well. Theo Johnson does a pretty good job of that. But if Theo Johnson is not available, that's not something Thomas Fidone does well. This is why I think Chris Manhurst likely is the guy who's tight end 3. Because I think if you ask most coaches what do they value in that backup tight end role, I just want a guy who can block, right? I need someone who can set up the run game and line up in line if need be. And Manhurst can catch the ball enough where I think they feel comfortable saying, we want him on the team to be there as an inline blocker. So I suspect your 3 locked in tight ends are Likely plus Johnson and Manhurst. Manhurst was somebody they signed quickly too, if you remember in the offseason. So whether or not Fidone or somebody else comes in as tight end 4, if they carry 4, I don't know. I suspect it might be 3. And I think, Pat Ricard, who, you can consider him, he's kind of a tight end, he's kind of,
I think that's a good point.
Right. So I do believe now you're not going to line up Pat Ricard in line, right? That's not what he does. But I think he's kind of like a hybrid F-back, and
normally you have a wide receiver kind of taking tight end taking Pat Ricard's role. And now, Pat Ricard just taking that role. So you don't have it for a tight end to fill it.
Our friend Rad adds a great point. This is where Likely will be a blocker and like something like GH counter. He lines up as an H-back and he's flying across the field for those counters, but he's not someone lining up in line. Anyway, I think in that room overall, I'm thrilled with it. I'll be honest. Like where I was, like I'm satisfied with the running back room. I'm not thrilled. I'm satisfied. I am thrilled with the construction of the tight end room. I really am. I think this is how you construct a tight end room. You have a big receiving threat who basically is a hybrid wide receiver 2. You've got an all-arounder who can be a good blocker as your tight end 2 in Theo Johnson, and you've got some combination of blockers and receivers behind them. I think this is like the perfect construction of a tight end room here. And it allows you to run 12 and 13 personnel as much as you want to.
No, it's the one thing I realize it's going to kind of suck when we get to cut down day is like Thomas Fidone, we'll see what he is in preseason, but it might be a world like, hey, maybe we can sneak this guy onto our practice squad. He showed some promise. That fuck Dable's going to go after everybody that we try to sneak onto our practice squad.
Yeah. I mean, if we put somebody in a practice squad, it means you're willing to lose them. It's okay. Yeah. I actually trust our our front office right now and how our decision making is with Harbaugh here, and
Mhm.
how Joe Shane's role has morphed with him, which we didn't talk about before the episode, but I should mention it at some point, that I was very impressed with Joe Shane's interview with John Schmeelk. As somebody who cannot stand Joe Shane historically, I was very impressed with how he presented himself during that interview. It was the best I ever heard him. So something, if they do keep him, if that's the Joe Shane we're getting, I'm happy. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I think that Dable's going to go after people. That's fine. But I still like our room and I'm happy with it. We should segue that though to the wide receiver room, because I think this is where it gets interesting, right? Because the way I view it is that when I say we, I mean the Giants view the tight ends as an extension of the receiving core. And I don't think they necessarily view it as just two separate, distinct rooms. I really do believe they want prototypes, right? Big guys who can block and receive. So there's kind of a spectrum, from Theo Johnson, from Chris Manhertz on one end down to Calvin Austin on the other. They probably view them all as like part of one spectrum. But let's look at the wide receiver room and what are your overall thoughts of it?
Real quick before we get there, I forgot to share it here. I didn't see it. Shout out Chris reminding everybody. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. So it's a reminder for everybody here. And he said, "Are we going to lose Dino Dong?" No, we'll see.
I mean, well, we might. I would like to say Dable wouldn't take him because he wouldn't play him last year, but he wouldn't pay Daniel Bellinger for 4 years, and then he convinced him to give him a $24 million contract. So what do I know?
But
yeah,
as far as our wide receiver room, we dive into that. I think they built it the way I probably would have wanted them to going into this offseason, which is, Malik Neighbors is your wide receiver 1, and he's coming off of injury, and you don't know what level he'll be at, when he'll be back to full level, but you have your wide receiver 1. Like you're not going to just add a wide receiver 1 because Malik Neighbors might not be ready for the start of the season. I think that's a silly approach with how much capital you have to put into adding a wide receiver to go across from. Obviously, if the value fits, I'm not saying don't add one, but I didn't want to force it. There was a really bad wide receiver free agency. I don't think the value ever lined up in the draft. But I think they did the correct thing where they got budget wide receivers. And I think they did a great job there. They brought in Darnell Mooney, who's a guy who's had over 900 yards receiving twice in his career. He's a guy who's been a contributor, and a lot of reason he struggled last year is because of quarterback play. And then Calvin Austin has been a guy who's consistently been a solid wide receiver 3 to 2 for Pittsburgh. He's produced for them. He's been the deep threat. I think that's a good add. And you bring back, you have Slayton here, you bring back Hodgins, you bring back Calvin Austin, and you go ahead and you add Malachi Fields in the draft to kind of give you the big body you were missing. I think there's a lot to improve here. I think this is probably the worst room outside of quarterback. If you lose your best player, how's your room look after that? Yeah. But I think given what they had, I think they did it the right way. It's just needed. We're going to have to continue to work on it.
I think the overall, we had a little debate about this. I think the overall wide receiver room, top to bottom, of the probable 6 players they would carry with them is better than a year ago. I do believe that.
I disagree.
And you disagree mainly because you think Wan'Dale Robinson is just much better than anybody else on this list other than Malik Neighbors.
Correct.
I understand that. But I think that our depth beyond Wan'Dale Robinson was not much. I mean, Slayton's a wash, but there wasn't much behind those guys. There's like nothing behind those guys, Yeah. And we saw it play out. Whereas now you have Neighbors, Slayton, and Mooney as your slated starters, or at least for now on the depth chart. But behind them, you have Malachi Fields, right? And you have Calvin Austin, these are quality. I mean, say what you want about Jalen Hyatt. Say what you want about the trade. I'm not doing that. But say what you want about the trade. But Malachi Fields is a specific prototype that I think has been lacking on this team. And they see the talent. They traded up for him. They paid what I would call real second round type value to go get him, right? They really, really believe in the talent. And they said, we're going to go get him at pick 74 because he's there. And we think he would, they mentioned it. They thought he was a second round pick. And I think a lot of people did. So a second round pick, mid second round pick on most draft boards who falls 74, the projection means guys like Brugler, guys like Jeremiah, they think he's going to be a wide receiver too in the NFL, like a decent one too. They think he's going to eventually become a wide receiver too. I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't know what that means from a number standpoint. We discussed that last week, but I think at least from the standpoint of the team, right, from John Harbaugh, Joe Shane, the coaching staff, they view Malachi Fields as a guy that they can see being wide receiver too in the not so distant future. And I think they probably view that as like a real wide receiver too, a guy with a lot of targets, a lot of yards, a lot of touchdowns. We can disagree enough, but whether or not we believe in the vision, but I think they view it that way.
Here's the thing, though. They can view it that way, and they could end up being right. But I think everybody, even the biggest fans of him, pretty much unanimously agree that this is not going to be an impact player year one. You drafted him because of the player you think he could be. This is a guy who they see a ceiling for. I think for year one, I don't expect Malachi Fields to provide much of anything for you, to be honest. I think he'll do some blocking. I think he'll maybe do some red zone stuff for you. Maybe he can be a fuck he's down there somewhere guy once in a while when he's on the field for dart. But overall, I don't think that he moves the needle at all for me in this room. Now, Calvin Austin, I do think Calvin Austin is a very good depth piece to add to this team, and I do think that's a guy we didn't have last year, at least until we brought in Hodgins. I do think Hodgins actually brought value to this team when he was here, but I think Calvin Austin brings more value just in a different way. But yeah, and then it just comes down to me between Mooney and Wandale, and I think there's a big difference why Mooney got $3 million and Wandale got like $18 million a year.
Yeah, obviously Wandale is the better bet long term over Mooney. He's younger. He's a better player right now. I don't really doubt that calculation. How much better of a player is he? I just disagree that the money is proportionate to the difference in the quality of the player you're getting right now.
It's not proportionate. I agree there.
Yeah, and I think guys like Wandale you're paying them at essentially what their peak value would be, right? He's coming off. So we talked about this. What do you think the odds are Wandale will never ever have a year as good as the year he just had?
Very, very high. I said when we talked about this, I said conservatively 75%, and that's I think being generous.
Right. I think there's a pretty good chance that this is peak Wandale year, or that even if he has 1 or 2 more years like he just had, I don't see them really exceeding what he just did, right? Like kind of at this level at his top. This is probably his peak one way or another. I don't know how many years he has like this, but I do think you're paying him at peak value. Whereas, a guy like Mooney, granted, probably on the downside a little bit, coming off a bad year, a lot of drops, that was an issue for him this year. He's had 5 or 6 drops really the last few years, although this year he had it on far less targets. I will say, watching the film, some of that was just quarterback play. And I think there was sometimes when guys don't have steady quarterback play, it does affect timing and rhythm, and that affects drops. Not excusing him, but I think Mooney's a good player. I think he's a good route runner. He's a reliable target for the most part. And I think he can make plays with the football when he has it, right? I think he's just a solid football player. Now, you don't want to see him drop the ball constantly. And if he does that, he's not going to play. But let's just assume for a second the drops come down to more of like a normal number for him, like 5-6%, which is kind of standard, right, for the NFL. If he's more in that range, I think he's a very good player. And I think he's a guy that, we're assuming likely is target number 2 in the passing game. Mooney is at best target 3. What do target 3s typically get in terms of target share per game? 5 targets, 4 targets, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking
that's being generous, to be honest.
Right. Probably like 4 targets per game is what we're looking at, right? So like 1 per quarter, something like that. So again, for what you're asking him to do relative to the price, I'm more than happy with him there. And then, like you mentioned, Calvin Austin is kind of a handicap to him, right? I mean, they're different players, but they kind of serve the same purpose, right? They're largely going to be in the slot, guys who are going to be speed options. get open. I think Austin is actually a very good player. You can argue Austin's a better player at this point in his career than Darnell Mooney, right? I think you can make that case. About the same size as Wandale. And I think a guy that could actually produce if he got targets, right? Like if he got the target share and he got if he got the treatment Wandale got last year, right? Just bear with me for a second. If he was on a team where he basically became wide receiver 1 and was asked to run a ton of routes, especially underneath, and just be a volume guy, do you think Austin could have had 700-800 yards?
I don't think he could have played that role.
Okay.
I don't think it's his game. In theory, I think he's as good a player. It's just not his role. It's not the way he plays.
No, and I say that, without any evidence to back it up because he hasn't done anything like that. But I think his play style is one that could be conducive to production on that plane. And the point I'm making is we have depth there, right? You don't have Wandale, but you have guys who can probably help there in that slot role. And again, I'm not discounting Fields. I'm not expecting a ton from him, especially early in the year. I do think he'll probably ease into this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's an impactful player for us by the middle to the end of the season as a solid wide receiver option. Darius Slayton is still here. Don't see him going anywhere just yet. As long as he's here, we got to talk about him because he's probably a starter. And what he's done in the past, as Dan Duggan has pointed out, is you forget about him all offseason, then he gets into camp and he outperforms everybody in camp and becomes wide receiver 2. And I think that's decidedly possible again. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's possible. I would be kind of surprised if he beat out Darnell Mooney because I mean they are similar level players. It's not that I'd be surprised because he's like that. Darnell Mooney's that much better a player, but I'm saying that more because Darnell Mooney has the relationship with Matt Nagy. I think that's a guy he's going to want to lean on more, and I think he's going to get every chance to win that job. But Slayton certainly has. You certainly could argue he's the second best wide receiver in this room.
Yeah. I mean, overall, you're right. When you look at it, it's not this outstanding room behind Malik Neighbors, but I think there's just enough depth there, especially when you factor in that they invested in Isaiah Likely to bring in.
That's the X factor there.
Right. He's essentially a receiver, right? So
that's the Wandale replacement.
Right. I think they're fine. I really do. I think there was a chance they could have taken Jordan Tyson over Francis Mauigoa if he was there at 10. They can say what they want, but I have my suspicions about that, right? That they might have been able to do that. I wouldn't have done it, and I'm glad we ended up with Francis. But I think they're looking to upgrade the room at some point. I just don't think they saw the value this year in the draft. That's all.
Stupid ads.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that.
So you're good.
But all right, so let's finish up with the offensive line, then we'll break down the offense holistically, and then before we jump into defense. So, offensive line. I mean, the starters right now, everybody knows Andrew Thomas, left to right. Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, Francis Mauigoa is the projected right guard, and Jermaine Illuminor. And the backups right now, and this is worth mentioning, and there are a lot of them left to right: J.C. Davis, Aaron Stinney, Lucas Patrick, Daniel Failele, Marcus Bowe, Josh Azudu, Jake Kubis, Brian Hudson, Evan Neal, Ryan Chernecki, Reed Halsky, and Dodi Dahuhi, who's that big 6'9" guy.
Struggling.
Yeah. I know. So what do you think about that offensive line right now?
I feel a lot better with Francis Mauigoa here. Look, I mean, I think one X factor here is going to be the offensive line coach, because I think we lost a very good offensive line coach, and I thought he played a big reason why we've been so successful. But I think we retained Andrew Thomas, obviously the best player on our offensive line. If Andrew Thomas is healthy, I think that this is a different offensive line unit. Jermaine Illuminor, kept him. Fantastic pass blocker, not your best run blocker, but, if you now have Francis Mauigoa next to him, maybe he can, help him out a little bit there as a run blocker. I think John Michael Schmitz took a step forward last year. I think he's an average center in this league. You'll take that on a rookie deal right now. And then John Runyon is a guy that, I thought we should have moved on from. We never did. I think if John Runyon's the worst player on your offensive line, I don't think that's a bad problem to have. I think my issue is more that he's making $9 million, and I think you could move on from that and get better players in here. But I think that there's a connection to Michigan there at John Runyon. I think that there's connection with his father. I think that this is a guy that intrigues John Harbaugh, and we'll see what we can get out of him this year. But you know, a l- there's some you went over the depth. I would say the one thing that kind of stands out to me here is Marcus Bowe. Is a guy we've talked about in the past. Being a player we would love to see move inside, see success at. We see him being successful at center. We could see him being able to compete at guard. The way this shook out to me, I think it's pretty clear that they want Marcus Bowe to be their swing tackle this year.
Yeah. So quickly on the starters, I'm pretty happy with the starting crew right now. Actually, while I don't love John Michael Schmitz overall, I think he's kind of steadily grown quietly into a solid-ish center, right? Like maybe slightly below average, but certainly a starting caliber NFL center.
Mhm.
And I think he's not so much a big net negative there anymore, like I think he was earlier on. I'm less worried about him. I think if he's showing growth every year, there's a chance he improves with better guard play around him this year. So I'm okay with him being our center this year. Obviously thrilled about the right side with Maui Noah and Illuminor. AT is AT. The left guard spot is the one that still gives me consternation.
Mhm.
John Runyon's a pro. He's a good pass blocker. He's an undersized offensive lineman. He sticks out like a sore thumb. This is a big room. Fatboy Summer is about these fat boys in the middle of this line. And even John Runyon, even John Michael Schmitz is like, 320 pounds. Like these are big dudes. And then you've got Runyon sitting at like 280, 285, something like that. He's really undersized relative to the rest of the room, and he looks small next to them. Mike Bloomgren, the Giants, the O-line coach, he's a Bill Callahan disciple, and he cut his teeth teaching what, gap, power principles. He's like a fundamentals teacher, but overall what he wants to do is run a run heavy power gap kind of system. And it's just hard to see a team doing that with a guy like Runyon, who just struggles to take on mass and power. Right. So he sticks out like a sore thumb. I get the Michigan connection and the John Runyon connections to Harbaugh. Meaning his father, but he's just such a misfit for what I think they're trying to accomplish here. And he has a $9.5 million cap hit. 9 million, or actually a bigger cap hit is he's got $9 million of cash that could actually be freed up in cap space if you moved on from him with somebody else. And I'm going to ask people here the question I asked you a bunch of times: is he $9 million better than the potential backups that could take over his job that are on the roster even right now? So Aaron Stinney, Daniel Failele, Josh Azudu, Marcus Bowe, if you put him out there, JC Davis, who you just drafted. Is he $9 million better than any of those guys?
No, I wouldn't say he is, but again, he's been not $9 million better than what we could upgrade him to all offseason. And they could have made this move early in free agency and brought in a guy to replace him very easily, and they didn't. So although I'm not a fan of Runyon, you don't see him as a fit. I don't see him as a fit. It feels like they're going to roll this out one more year at John Runyon.
I think you're probably right, and that's where this is headed, because I feel like they would have pulled the trigger already on him to save up that money, and when they could have used it on other free agents. At the same time, they're spending money post draft. Clearly, the comp formula mattered to them, so I'm not so sure they're done. Right? I don't know if they're done roster building. And I'm just saying, like, I think Runyon's a guy that if you're being very objective and you see them in camp, you're like, this guy, he's sticking out for not being as strong as the others. He may not be the starting left guard. That's all I'm saying. And if he's not the starting left guard, you wonder if he has a role on this team. And I think it's worth watching. That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't think he's 100% a lock to be our left guard going into the season. I think he's likely today, but I'm not so sure he's a lock.
The one situation I could see him getting replaced, I threw this out to you, was Joel Bitonio. Joel Bitonio is a guy who we don't know if he's retiring or not. He hasn't really made that decision. Sometimes guys just retire without saying anything. I remember Larry Warford was a guy I wanted the Giants to get, and he just never said anything. He just ended up retired. But and maybe that's the situation that's happening here. Or maybe he'll decide he wants to come back and there's not a place for him in Cleveland anymore, but there is a place for him with his former O-line coach. And maybe it was said, hey, I wasn't going to move on from John Runyon for this guy or this guy, but now Joe Bitonio is available. And just maybe that's not a situation I could see him replace somebody.
We would obviously replace him with Bitonio in a heartbeat. I read an article recently that Bitonio gave an interview to local Cleveland paper, and he's got 3 daughters or 3 kids, and he's been married for a long time, and they're very, very ingrained in the Cleveland community. He and his wife, and I think he mentioned how I can't even imagine not being a Brown or playing somewhere else, but I don't know if there's a place for me on this team. And he's like, I don't know if I want to retire. I'm still thinking about it. And he thanked Andrew Berry for being patient with him, because it sounds like the Browns would like him to come back in some capacity. And he said, they're being patient with me and not forcing me to make a decision. But he also kind of left open the door, I may want to go play somewhere else. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. I'm just going to say I'm not counting on Joel Bitonio.
I'm not counting on him either. But if he's still open to playing, he's going back to be a backup. That seems odd to me.
Right.
But I don't know.
I don't know if he's going to be a backup. That's the thing. I'm not sure what their plans are over there.
I guess he could start over Tevin Jenkins.
Well, that's my point, right? They may bring him in and have everybody else's depth. We don't know. And maybe he's the one who hasn't decided to go back yet. So I'm just not counting on that one. I think Zeitler is a little more possible, but as I mentioned earlier to people when we were discussing this, Zeitler has really never played, other than I think 3 snaps in his career, anything but right guard. He's been a right guard all the way through. So I think if you're bringing in Kevin Zeitler at the age of, 36 now? If you're bringing him in at this age and he wants to come, are you going to ask Kevin? Right. I mean, are you going to ask him to play left guard at this point? No. He's going to be your right guard. And you can move Francis to left guard. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world at all. But I think that's what the configuration would be if you brought him in to do that.
It kind of makes me, it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, but it kind of makes me think of when the Lions drafted Penei Sewell, and Penei Sewell should have been the left tackle. He was a fantastic prospect, but they had Taylor Decker there, who's been played left tackle for them for 8 years. And there's all right, we'll just teach the young guy a new position.
A good player is a good player. Francis will be fine wherever you put him. I actually think the most likely person, if there's someone who might unseat John Runyon, the most likely person is Daniel Faalele. Whether you want to admit it or not, or accept it or not, he's on the roster. He's familiar with John Harbaugh. Obviously, he's a guy that he played with him for a couple of years. Didn't have the best year, but also I think sometimes it's a little oversold how bad he was, by people. He has his problems, but he's a big, powerful guy, and I think he fits the scheme of what they would want to do. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's competing for the job. We're just assuming there's somebody who can compete with Runyon. But to your original point, I think Runyon is probably the starter. I think that's the likely scenario here.
I think it is very, very, very likely John Runyon's your week 1 starter if healthy. I think there's a world they get tired of John Runyon if their run game isn't working. And that's when a change is made. I could see that potentially happening. And
then it's most likely Falafel. He probably takes over, right? And the other guy we shouldn't discount, he's going to get a chance to compete, is Josh Azudu. And I know people are going to laugh at this idea, but Josh Azudu fits the prototype of what they might be looking for. He's a strong dude. He's an athlete. He was a flexible offensive lineman when we drafted him in North Carolina. And then they just kind of bounced him around. Like many things that happened during the Dable era, they never allowed players to settle into a position and learn it properly. And then 4 years went by and you didn't know what they were, and they were gone. This happened quite a bit, under Dable with young players, they just couldn't find their footing. That was a staple of his time here. Azudu's a guy that I think they're going to take a look at. And if he gets a chance here, it's going to be at guard. So again, he'll compete. all in all, could they improve the line by bringing somebody else to play guard? Absolutely. And if they can, they should. But even if they don't, I'm pretty satisfied with this line just because you brought back Illuminor and you brought in Francis. I think it does a lot, and I think it stabilizes things. I don't think this line is going to be a negative, honestly. I think this is going to be like a top 15, top 12 type unit in the NFL. I'm pretty confident of that, actually.
I hope so. I think that's very realistic. But I think a lot's going to hinge on what difference does the O-line coach make. This is why I say your Josh Azudu idea, though. Ooh.
So much Josh Azudu hate.
I thought you were going to go with JC Davis with one of these arguments. Well, your guy.
I love JC Davis, but he's never played guard, and he's coming. He's a 6th round pick. I'm just being realistic. I think the probability that a 6th round pick changing position becomes your starting left guard and unseats a veteran is very, very low.
I'll say this. I agree. It's very, very low. I think it's very, very low for anybody, to be honest with you, that's going to unseat Runyon, in my opinion. But if there's anybody that I think would take an unexpected step, it'd be the rookie. Unless they give Marcus Bowe an opportunity to compete at guard.
So right now he's listed as a backup tackle. I think John Harbaugh mentioned he'd be a swing guard, swing tackle for us, right? But mostly swing guard, but I think some tackle reps. I think when camp breaks out, I'm curious what they do, but I think they'll have him play tackle initially, like backup, second, third team tackle. They probably want to see what he can do there. Ultimately, he'll start taking guard reps as well. It's a long climb for a 6th round rookie who's probably going to be like 4th string guard to climb all the way up as a rookie to unseat a veteran starter. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
is it possible? It's unlikely. I think, believe it or not, I think guys like Azudu have more of a pathway to do that because they're viewed as veterans. They're going to play one position, and let's see what they do. And again, the most probable person, I mean, it's just staring you in the face. It's Falafel. He's the guy, right? He's like a starter in the NFL for 2 years. He's a backup right now. If the starter can't do what you want,
he's next up.
He's next up. He's the most likely starter that'll come up and play. But we'll see how that goes. All in all, I'm very happy with the O-line. I think let's talk about the whole offense now, right? We've talked about all the positions. We talked about the players they added, who they've lost, what the line looks like. We talked about the running back room, the coaches, right? Just very briefly, a refresher. Everybody knows Matt Nagy, more of a pass-happy guy from the Andy Reid system historically. But we don't know what he's going to be under John Harbaugh. He's never coached with a guy like John Harbaugh before. Andy Reid is pass-happy. He worked with Andy Reid, and then he was on his own. Brian Callahan is his quarterbacks coach. But Greg Roman is, I think, senior advisor or senior consultant to the offense. He's very widely viewed as run game coordinator. And Mike Blumgren, the O-line coach, is a gap power run game guy. What do you see us doing with this depth chart and this offense?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a run heavy team. I think whenever you're projecting out the stats of these receivers and Dart and whatever, I think it's important to keep in mind that I think this is going to be a very run heavy team. I think that a Cam Scadaboo is going to get an opportunity to get a large workload. And I think Tyrone Tracy's going to get a decent workload too. This is Harbaugh has been a guy who's used multiple guys, and also throw into that is Jackson Dart is going to be used. I mean, you look at a guy like Greg Roman, and we talk about guys who have involved their running back or their quarterback within their running game more than basically any guy. It's Greg Roman. I mean, he did it with Kaepernick. He did it with Lamar. He's done it in multiple places now. So I think that he is he'll be intriguing part of this offense for us. And then I think the pass game will depend on Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors will make or break how good this pass game would truly be. I think without Malik Neighbors, I think it's perfectly competent, and I think leaning on the run game and using the run to set up the pass, I think that Jackson Dart being able to work at a structure and things like that, you'll see a lot of what you saw last year. But I think if you do have Malik Neighbors, I think that's a guy who can open up your run game. I think guys who can bust open coverages for guys like Isaiah Likely. It should be interesting to see how these offenses come together with that West Coast Andy Reid offense, Greg Roman power offense, and the philosophies that John Harbaugh's picked up through his many coordinators.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that I think this is shaping up to be a power gap offensive line scheme.
Mm-hmm.
The big picture, the big thing to the O line that we're adding is really just the extra guard, the moving guard, and Pat Ricard. You know, and I think there's going to be a ton of establish the run. Just the vision of Francis Mauigoa opening a run lane, Patrick Ricard running through it and destroying somebody on the next level, and then here comes Cam Scadaboo right behind him. I mean, that's just, you can see the vision, right? Like, that's what you want to do. You want to establish a lot of smash mouth football with those guys. And I think that's going to be the foundational focus of this team. It's probably going to be 50-50 splits, passing and running. I was having a little discussion with Dan Schneider on the timeline today. He thinks we're going to be like more set up to be like an explosive pass happy kind of team. And I was like, I don't think so, Dan. I was like, I think Nagy, whatever you think of him, what he was before, I think, under John Harbaugh and with the personnel they brought, the other coaches, I think this is going to be a pretty even split. I think it's going to be established the run and then really establish something that Jackson Dart thrived at in college, which is play action. Mm-hmm. Right, he was really good with play action.
Agreed.
And I think they're gonna make an emphasis to establish a power run game and then work off of Jackson Dart's play action. And then you're gonna see him use all of these targets all over the field. You have middle of the field targets in guys like Mooney, Likely, Austin, Malik. At times, you have outside targets in Malik, Darius Slayton, Fields. I think they're gonna create a nice little, passing attack that stretches and attacks all elements of the pass of the field, but it's going to be all flowing off of that run game. And I really think that's what the foundation of this team is.
Our guy Giants Edge, he sent me a DM today, and I thought would be really interesting in this offense. It was a Liam Cohen play, and it was with the fullback blocking up the middle, but it is a play action. So the fullback just runs to the middle and then he runs a sail route and they hit the fullback on the sail route because he sets up like they're about to go power eye right through it and he just takes off and runs a sail. It was cool to watch. So maybe it's something like that. Who knows? Let's see if we get creative.
I'm trying to imagine Pat Ricard running a sail route.
I responded to him. I was like, better learn sail route, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be fun. I'll put it that way. I love football like this. I don't know how you feel. That pass happy shit, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy it if it's really humming. But for the most part, I like power football. I get excited when you see your offensive linemen just like get into dude's chest on the D line, driving backwards, and you see your running back just plowing through people to get 5-6 yards. And just over and over again, just punishing the defense. I love football like that. And then you see your quarterback drop back when the defense is softened up and just drive the ball down the field or hit somebody over the middle and just really keep defenses off balance. I think we're going to see a ton of that. I love this kind of stuff.
I hope we can get there. I love a good run offense. There's parts of it that I haven't liked in years of where the Giants haven't been able to do it. Like even with Saquon, it just like it was inconsistent. It was kind of like built around that breakaway run to really do it all. And this idea where the Giants have felt like they had to force the run because they feel like they have to set up the run, but they didn't have the ability to do it. So they just kept doing it when they couldn't do it. It was so frustrating. But if we can actually set up the run and successfully do it, that would be great.
Absolutely. I want to bring up one guy that our chat is discussing, and I think it's one worth discussing. I've thought about him as well, is Trey Benson from the Cardinals. Okay. Trey Benson was a second-round pick a couple of years ago, third-round pick, pick 66, early third, pick 66 by the Cardinals. Really a dynamic back. We liked him a lot coming out of Florida State that year, remember?
Yep.
And he just has fallen on the depth chart. John Connor was ahead of him. Then they signed Tyler Algier to become like the guy, and he leaves Bijan Robinson to become the guy. And then they immediately draft, Jeremiah Love. So now they have Jeremiah Love, Tyler Algier, and James Conner, ahead of him. John Connor is running from the Terminator. James Conner ahead of him. And Benson is 4th on the depth chart. And I don't know if they're going to carry 4 running backs. He might get cut. They might look to trade him, and
I wouldn't trade for him.
But let me give you some stats on Trey Benson. I know people are like, oh, he sucks. I mean, I'm looking at his metrics. I'm like, I don't think he sucks. Like, so he hasn't had a chance. But last year, dude, he only got 40 attempts. He had 29 attempts and 40 snaps. That's all he got. But in those attempts, he had 160 yards. So he's averaging 5.5 yards per attempt and getting 3.59 yards after contact. That's really good. That's actually really, really good. And he forced 10 missed tackles in those attempts, which is actually very good.
Yeah, it's 1 in 3.
Right. The year before that, in his rookie year, he had only 63 attempts, 4.6 yards per attempt. He had a touchdown and a fumble, but again, 3.33 yards after contact. Now I know he's had injuries and issues like that, but if he's really fallen down on their depth chart and they're looking to move off him, I would consider like a player for player swap for him if I could get one.
A player for player, sure.
I'm not trading a draft pick.
No.
But what I'm saying is, what if there's a player they covet on your team or they could use on your team or something like that? Can you do that with a team like that? Them, right? So I'll be honest, like, what if they were willing? What if they were willing to give you Benson and a 3rd for Kayvon? No. You would Benson and a 3rd round pick?
I guess I'd do it. I guess I would for the 3rd. I don't give a shit about Benson though in that. That's not moving the needle.
It's for the pick. What I'm saying is if you could pack, like, this is a team like
I guess I would for the 3rd. I just heard Benson and Kayvon and said no.
Not for Kayvon, dude. But I'm just saying, like, if you get a real pick for him with him, anyway, I wouldn't be upset with a guy like that. Anyway, I don't want to have too much discussion of Benson. I'm just saying he's an interesting discussion point of the kind of player they might look for. All right, so I agree with you. I think we're both expecting a run heavy team that sets up the pass. I think they have. When you think of it that way, the concerns about like the receivers, I think it's less, right? I think this is going to be a run heavy team, a power team. Jackson Dart playmaking ability on top of that. I think they've got plenty of receiving targets. They really do. They got plenty. Now that doesn't mean they won't try to improve it, but they got plenty to be successful next year. I put up a question today to the timeline of Jackson Dart projected stats, and I asked, how would you feel about these stats this year? And the numbers I put up, I'm forgetting exactly what I wrote, but I think I put up something like in 17 games, 3,750 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, 10 interceptions, about 400-ish, 450 rushing yards, and I put 9 touchdowns. That's probably a lot.
Yeah,
but what if you and you said that's Josh Allen, fine. But I don't think it's crazy to think he would put up a year where he has like 35 to 3,700 passing yards, 24 touchdowns. And just talk about the air. I don't think that's a crazy year.
If he doesn't have as many rushing touchdowns, I could see it.
Right. No, I think his rushing touchdowns will come down. I agree with you. They're not going to run freaking Jackson Dart QB power in the goal line like fucking Dable.
I would be ecstatic if he gets 30 touchdowns this year, but I don't necessarily. It's a lot to expect, of course. 30's a lot, and I know he was on pace to do it, but I don't expect that pace to keep up, especially if they're going to be a high run team.
I think that he's going to flirt with about 4,000 total yards is what I'm going to say.
I agree.
He'll be around 4,000 total yards and include passing and rushing. And I think he'll be right. I think he might not be quite at 30, but he'll be around 30 touchdowns total. I think maybe a little under it, but in that territory.
I said 4,000 total and 25 total TDs. That's where I could see him being at. And I think that's really good still. Like I think he could be less than that, but depends how heavy.
He could, but I think I would guess more like in the 27 to 30 range in total touchdowns, but whatever,
I think it depends how much we run the ball, man. I mean, like Sam Darnold had a phenomenal year last year, and he was like, his numbers weren't crazy because they ran the shit out of that football.
That's fair. At the end of the day, that none of this matters. What matters is what your offense is doing in terms of points per game, and also what it's doing to impact the clock and your win probability, right? That's the way to look at it. I think this is a team that's going to be able to chew up clock, right? And it's something we've gotten away from in the NFL, but I think teams are going to head back towards that. A power heavy team, a rush heavy team, you're going to eat up a lot of clock and have more sustainable drives, not depending on necessarily short passing, but actually a lot of running. I think they could put up 26 points per game, honestly, with this offense. Somewhere in that territory and eat up a lot of clock. That's different than putting up 26 points per game and just scoring very quickly and leaving your defense on the field, right? That's a big difference, right? If you're able to sustain drives, I know that was like a big negative a few years ago, but sustain drives where you're not putting the ball in harm's way much, and you're able to actually chew up a lot of clock relative to like the offenses that just have like 3 big explosive plays and touchdowns. If you can have a good mixture and you eat up a decent amount of clock and you play a little bit of ball control and you put up 25, 26 points a game, you're going to win a lot of football games. And I think that's what I'm looking for this year.
Yeah. I mean, look, even if you don't get to 26, like if 24, 25, like you said, if you're sustaining long drives, I think it's a big difference. I think that's a good point.
All right. Anything else on offense? We jump to defense.
No, I think that's all I got. Let's jump over to defense.
Long offensive discussion. Defense, I think, is a little bit more straightforward, right?
I don't
Wilson,
think we can look at it like this is set up necessarily.
Correct. So we should talk first about the coaching difference, right? I mean, we're going from Shane Bowen, I don't want to get into Shane Bowen, but systematically, a guy who really was defined by his lack of creativity, right? There wasn't a lot of exotic pressure. There wasn't a lot of exotic looks post-snap. It was a very vanilla defense. What you see is what you get kind of defense. And fundamentally, a lot of cover 3, cover 1, but off man. All man coverage, but off man. 7 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. So giving up easy passes to the offense for quick completions and yardage. And the run defense was just not there, right? And I don't know if that was all his fault. I just feel like a lot of that was personnel, honestly. But there wasn't much done to help it. You're going from that to Denard Wilson's scheme, which is very different, right? I mean, stylistically, I think it couldn't be more different. Much more zone. So we're going from more, single high looks to more 2 deeps, right? I think he runs a ton of cover 2, at least to start, a lot of 2 deep shells. But fundamentally, the defense is about taking away the easy yardage. I think that's the best way to define it, right? He does not want to give away easy yardage, either in the run game or in the pass game. What does that mean in the pass game? He wants his corners playing at the line of scrimmage. He wants more bodies at the line of scrimmage playing press, because that takes away that quick pass. So he needs physical corners who can do that and handle things. Behind that press coverage, he runs a lot of zone match principles, which we can get into, but ultimately it's you cover your zone, you find the receiver in your area, and you drop into man coverage on that guy. So he needs receivers he needs corners who can do that. I think we have guys who can do that, but fundamentally at the snap, more people are at the line of scrimmage than not. They're crowding it, they're taking away the quick pass. And in the run game, because of that alignment defensively, he needs somebody to take away the run so his edge rushers can get to the quarterback, right? You're slowing down the quarterback on a pass play. You're giving your edge rushers that extra half second to get there. You can't be beat by the run game. So he needs a defensive lineman to 2-gap, right? Fundamentally, you need 2-gappers in the middle of that D-line who are going to create traffic and not allow easy runs. So I think that's, in a nutshell, what I would expect from Denard Wilson's defense. Do you have any other thoughts on that before we get into the players?
No, I think you said it well. So let's dive into the players.
All right. So we lose Dexter Lawrence. We talked about how you have to rethink this defense. I don't think we rethought it that much. I think we just kind of created more of a standard Denard Wilson defense without Dexter Lawrence. Let's start with the D-line, since we started our episode there. No more Dex, but I mean, I think I like the depth here, right? So DJ Reader at nose tackle, who's a pretty solid NFL prior All-Pro nose tackle.
Yeah,
at this point. Excellent 2-gapper, right? Like from what I'm describing, I think that's what he does. He 2-gaps well. He stops the run well. He's a pocket pusher. He's a guy that creates a lot of traffic. He will play approximately 60% of the snaps. So I think essentially a first and second down guy. Sometimes he'll be there on third down. He'll rotate out a lot, but that's what he's there for. And then he's flanked on both sides. And right now the depth chart has Shelby Harris, our 3-tech we signed, also a good 2-gapping 3-tech. has some one gap ability to pass rush, not quite what it was a few years ago, but he's still good at the run game. And then right now, our lads has Roy Robertson Harris as our starting defensive end. I don't know if I would view it that way. I
Yeah, I
think
disagree.
Darius Alexander is more likely to be that starting defensive end. But
Even
how do
Chauncey
you think?
Golston.
Even Golston, right?
I mean, we're not going to be running a lot of 3-4. It's going to be a lot of nickel primarily, but when we do have the 3 down linemen and with the 2 edges on the field, I think I think Darius Alexander is going to get an opportunity here to show he took a step, and he's a guy both of us were very high on coming out, and I think showed flashes last year. He's an older player, so hopefully he starts to put it together with a full offseason in the NFL. I do have some hopes for him to be a contributor for us. And I mean, I think keep an eye on Chauncey Golston. If when we're in a 3-4 set, I think he can play that 3-4 D end for you.
So I was talking again, our friend Matt, Cowboys fan Matt, earlier today about this. Tennessee, the last couple of years, ran nickel approximately 50% of the time. That was by far their most common alignment. But you know the next most common alignment was base 3-4, 22% of the time, which is way higher than most teams are living at right now, right? Most teams are running base about 10, 12%, 8%. Mm-hmm. He lives in base about a quarter of the plays. So I don't think it's, so what is that? That's 1 out of 4 downs essentially, right?
Mm-hmm,
so the way I look at it is they may run base on first down just to have the big bodies to take away the run, and they'll trust their 4 line. And this is something you might see this number higher on the Giants, Monty, because our 4 linebackers are so freaking good and so athletic that I don't think you have to run nickel and take a linebacker off the field or a D tackle off the field. I think you can run base and have that extra down lineman early to prevent any big runs and get you to a 2nd and 3rd and long, hopefully, where you can start playing with nickel. I actually believe our linebacking crew's athleticism allows us that flexibility. So I do think that we're going to run a decent amount of base, at least early on. So that's what I suspect.
If we're running that much base, do you see a world, assuming Kayvon's on this team, that he plays some 3-4 D end?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've debated whether or not I want him to do this, but I guess it depends on where you align him, right? If you're putting Kayvon on the outside shoulder of the tackle, playing kind of like that 5-tech, down, defensive end kind of thing, I think that's great. I think Kayvon with his hand in the dirt in that role is actually very good. He proved to be a good, strong edge setter. If you're asking him to line up on the inside shoulder of the tackle and on the outside shoulder of the guard, or head up against a guard, that's not good.
Oh, it's a guard, yeah. I mean, but how do you feel about him lining up head up on the tackle or inside the tackle? Because I think you'll see a lot of that.
I think Kayvon can handle being a 4-eye. I actually think he's plenty strong to do that. And he poses some nightmares for tackles with his first step get off, right? In that alignment. So I think he can do it. I don't know what they're going to do with Kayvon though. I'm not sure, but what you're bringing up is a good point. Like they might use him in that role, and I think he can handle it. I just don't want him lining up any more inside than that.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that does create some issues in terms of alignment. If the purpose is to stop the run, do you really want Kayvon Thibodeau in those early downs doing that? I would say no.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the issue. I think you want your bigger body defensive ends and defensive linemen there. So you want the Darius Alexanders there. You want even the Roy Robertson Harris is there. Hal, you may want to put 2 nose tackles out there early on, right? And you might want to put in Bobby Jameson Travis with DJ Reader to 2 gap and allow Shelby Harris to be the other guy. I just think in the early downs, if you're going with the 3-down alignment, you want the 2 gappers and the big run stuffers out there and allow your linebackers to do their job behind them.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I'm just at the same time, I'm thinking like, if you're going to run bases often, how can you use your personnel best? And I'm thinking just get as many of these pass rushers as you can onto the field. And, I think to putting Kayvon there is one way. And I think, again, Chauncey Golston, I think, is another guy who could get some usage there.
Yeah. I think they're interchangeable to some degree there, although Golston's he's a more stout down lineman, Kayvon's really a true edge. But you can get creative. I'll put it that way. Right. but he does use. But again, the fundamentals here of the defense are that you want your D lineman to two gap and stop the run. You no longer have the unicorn in Dexter Lawrence, who's out there doing kind of everything, and he can rush the passer from the nose tackle position.
Yeah, for like 80% of the snaps.
Yeah, but if there's a silver lining there, I think you're going to have more reliable run defense oriented defensive linemen, right? Just kind of spaced out, more guys who they're perfectly happy just eating blocks and creating traffic and making it hard to run on the inside.
Yeah, I think having a legitimate DT2 is going to help this run defense. I think the coaching will help this run defense. I think Arvo Reese will help this run defense. I do think it'll be better this year.
Yep. What about the linebackers? I mean, I think that's by far our strongest crew now, which is crazy to say, but inside, I view our linebacker crew no longer as like off-ball inside linebackers and edge rushers. I view them as just our linebackers, kind of like the throwbacks of the Giants of the 80s and 90s. Arvell Reese, Tremaine Edmonds, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau. I think that we have a ridiculous crew of linebackers that can do kind of everything. That's the strength of this defense up the middle. How do you see Denard Wilson deploying them?
I mean, I think you'll see, I think Abdul Carter and Brian Burns as your primary edge rushers on most downs. I think you'll see them, lined up likely on like the outside shoulder of their tackles and, using their speed to produce pass rush. But at the same time, I think you have Arvo Reese is going to play a significant role from that weak side linebacker. They'll mix him in as a pass rusher, and Micah McFadden will be a perfectly capable guy to put in there when you're mixing Arvo Reese as a pass rusher. But Arvo Reese will be a guy who can come down, blitz. You can drop guys like Abdul Carter into coverage when you do that, and I think you get really interesting to the point where you don't know which linebackers coming from where. I think Tremaine Edmonds will give you some pass rush stuff, some blitzing upside, but I think for the most part, he's going to be the traditional linebacker of this group. He's going to be your stack and shed guy. He's going to be your run defender. While you kind of let Arvo Reese run crazy. And then, then you'll mix a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau in there as well. I think it's going to be what we focus on. I think that is what's going to set us apart, and getting as many of these guys on the field at one time and being as creative as possible with them is what's going to set this defense apart.
If you just look at the talent in the linebacking room, it's pretty, I mean, we know it's astounding, but when you think of it like the way I'm going to present it, it's even more ridiculous. We have 5 first-round picks as linebackers.
Yeah.
5. Tremaine Edmonds was 16th overall in his draft. Arvell Reese was 5th overall just now. Brian Burns was 16th overall in his draft. Abdul Carter was 3rd overall in his class, and Kayvon Thibodeau was 5th overall in his class. Like, that's insane. We have 3 top 10 picks and 5 first-round picks in the linebacking room. It's an insane abundance and glut of talent.
And as of right now, I'd say only like one of those picks you'd call disappointing for their draft capital.
Right. Kayvon is the only one who's like semi-disappointing. And it's not even that disappointing. He's a good player.
Up to 5. If he was 16, you're fine with it.
Right. But he also has a double-digit sack career, season under his career, and he was ascending and getting better when he got hurt last year. So like I'm not even ready to call that disappointing. It just maybe not quite what you wanted after 4 years, but still, I mean, a good football player. This defense, ultimately, the ceiling of this defense is going to be set by that linebacking room. Right? What the heights it can achieve will be set by that. Everything on this defense, in my opinion, is there to basically complement and support that linebacking crew. And that's how this defense is designed. The guys up front, the D linemen, are there to create run stuffing, space eating blockers up there. Defensive linemen up there to basically allow the linebackers behind them to make plays. And the corners and the DBs are there to basically support them and not allow easy passes or big plays. I think everything about this defense is around our linebacking crew decimating the other team, whether it's by creating sacks, whether it's by run stoppage, whether it's by creating turnovers. Joe Shane talked, by the way, you didn't go back and
I
hear the
haven't
interview
listened to
yet,
it
right?
now. Yeah.
So for anyone who has not heard it, I highly recommend listening to Joe Shane's 20-minute interview on Giants Huddle with John Schmelk. Whatever you may think of Joe Shane, this was the most impressive I've ever heard Joe Shane speak about anything. I really enjoyed it. He just discussed his draft picks, how he viewed every player, how he scouted them, and what he envisions their role in the future. Really sounded, it was refreshing to hear. And what he said about Arvell Reese, one of the things he said about him was something that I mentioned here on this pod a long time ago when we were talking about Sonny Styles. He's like, you can imagine a guy with his size and length next to Tremaine Edmonds being a real problem in the passing lanes over the middle of the field. And you could see the vision, right? Like we were talking about it with Sonny Styles, like how I can see them envisioning the wingspan being an issue. I think they looked at it and they said Reese can do that too. They're about the same size, right? He's a little shorter than Sonny Styles, but wingspan I think is similar. And I think they look at guys like Edmonds and Reese as real assets in the passing game over the middle. They take away throwing windows for quarterbacks. They're guys who can take the football away, and they're downhill attack style linebackers who can take away the run game. The ceiling of this team defensively is those linebackers and what they can do, and everybody else is there to help them. And that's how I look at it.
Yeah, it should be interesting how they deploy them. I don't think this is going to be a defense that is like blitzing out their ass or anything like that. I think where it's going to be interesting when the way you watch the like Mike McDonald defenses and Jesse Minter and whatnot, which hopefully it seems like he will model his defense after. Is it's not about how many you send, it's you don't know where it's coming from. And I think that they'll get creative where they line these guys up. I think you'll see every single one of these guys dropping in coverage at some point in the game. You'll see Abdul Carter dropping the coverage. You'll see Brian Burns dropping the coverage. You'll see Kayvon Thibodeau dropping the coverage. You'll see obviously Arvell Reese drop into coverage and Tremaine Edmonds. And you also see every single one of those guys rushing at some point in the game. And I think that is just going to cause absolute mayhem. And it'll be from other positions too. It's not going to just be them. We'll get into, what we can do from the secondary as well. But I think that's going to be really fun to watch. And, we were kind of just last year, we just send 4 and, hope to get home. And yeah, I think that was why this part of the reason this defense was so bad. There was no creativity. It's fine if you send 4, but you gotta confuse the offense with it. And I think this way you'll get interceptions and you'll rush his quarterback. They won't know where you're dropping to, where you are. And I think that this linebacker core is a dream for a guy like Denard Wilson.
Yeah. Again, I think this is a ceiling issue with these guys. And I think their floor is extremely high to begin with, but this defense will only go as high as these linebackers take them. That's how I look at it. I think everybody else is there to be like lunch pail guys. These linebackers are there to take us to the next level. And I think they will. I'm very bullish on this linebacking crew. So, that's how I see Denard Wilson deploying them. Like they're his weapons. He can use them however he wishes, but what he does with them is going to define this defense in terms of its ceiling. The DB room, from a supportive standpoint, like we're talking about, again, we mentioned that Denard Wilson likes to play press. He wants them to be physical. He wants them to be bullies at the line of scrimmage for 2 reasons. One is and if you listen to Denard Wilson interviews, he says this very openly. He wants them to take away the quick pass from quarterbacks, right? He doesn't want them to have easy passes. He wants his pass rushers to have a chance to get there and quarterbacks to have to think. And he wants wide receivers to have to beat his guys.
Yep.
It takes the extra split second. But he also, just by crowding the line of scrimmage with more bodies, that's run support, right? You're just more people at the line of scrimmage. They're going to take away running lanes on the outside if it happens to be a run play, right? So eyes are generally on the running back, on the quarterback at the snap, in position to take away the receiver to press, but they're always eyeing the backfield. Right. And I think that's something that's a feature of this defense where he expects his DBs to not ignore the run game. They're supposed to be there for run support, and they're going to be at the line of scrimmage. So if that run is coming their way, he expects them to recognize it and make the play on the ball. So That's what you should expect. And so look for those traits, I think, as we go through camp. Which cornerback is jamming well in press and delaying the release? Who's keying in on the run and making plays in the run game as a defensive back, not just recognizing it and chasing the play, but able to make a tackle. And then when you get to the coverage side of it, it is match zone principles. So you want to, you have to be intelligent. You have to understand route concepts and who you're covering and where they're going and be able to keep up with the guys. So I think those are the three elements of being a DB in this room that are important, at least for the corners.
Yeah. It's such a welcome change again that, we're not going to just play this off coverage and just give people easy receptions and make them play in front of you. I absolutely can't stand that stuff. But we have the right cornerbacks. Like, we talked about how maybe, the O-line that was given to Harbaugh might not have been like exactly what they're going to want long term, but I do think we handed them the right types of corners. We'll see if they're the right talent and what they can do with them. I think Denard Wilson's the right guy to try to develop these guys, but I mean, Paulson Adebo is a tall press corner. He had a down year, but he was kind of playing in the wrong system. I don't love that he missed the first week of was the only guy outside of Dex missed the first week of workouts, but he's there now. So I'm sure I did not go unnoticed with John Harbaugh, but it's his job to show him why he's going to be a contributor for this team. We brought in Colton Hood. Colton Hood's a press man corner. That's what they do at Tennessee. Greg Newsome thrived in college doing press, and he's done it. He's been good in the NFL when he's done it. We'll see if in this scheme if we can kind of unlock former first round pick Greg Newsome, see what we can get out of him. You got guys, man. You got Andrew Phillips, who's he's a guy. He's a feisty guy. He's best when he's playing up on a guy and being physical. He's probably more of your first two down guys, but that you're going to have options here. You're going to have guys like, Washington is somebody who's probably going to get snaps at nickel. There's lots of guys here. And that's, I think, what's going to make this quarterback room interesting is I think you'll be moving these guys around and giving these guys chances to get breaths and give these guys different looks and get them onto the field. I never have enough good corners.
John Harbaugh talked about having positionless defensive players, right? That's their goal, is that positionless defense. And I do think you're going to hear a lot of that. And I think a lot of that, and he was talking about it in reference to Arvil Reese, but I think that really applies in the DB room. Now, there are some guys that have to be boundary corners, right? Because there's only so many guys who can do that. But I think they have guys who can play a little bit of both. And you got into it. So 50% of the snaps are a nickel. So you're probably looking at two boundary corners, two deep safeties, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a nickel. And let's just take Washington out of this because he's kind of the hybrid, right? I think Washington is the safety nickel. He's that guy. And don't be surprised if he ends up starting, by the way. He may earn it because he's got a history with Harbaugh.
Harbaugh likes him.
Right. But for a second, let's just say he's a backup guy and he's a flex guy.
Mm-hmm.
You do need to really have three starting corners in the system, two outside, one nickel. And Joe Shane, again, in the interview with Schmelk, said something that I've heard John Harbaugh and Denard Wilson mention now. They're not looking at this the way Giant fans are. They keep mentioning we have five guys who can be starters at cornerback. And people are going to get sick when I say the names, but Paulson Adebo, obviously, Colton Hood, who they just drafted, Greg Newsome, who they just signed, former first-round pick, Drew Phillips, right, starting nickel, and Deonte Banks. He's in that grouping, right? They consider him as a contender for a starting job. That doesn't mean he's going to get one. He's going to have to earn it. But, I think they look at this and saying five guys for three jobs, and who's going to earn it? And I'm not sure who the odd man out here. I'm serious. I think there's a good bet that Deonte Banks will not be a starter on this team because I think he has a long way to go to prove that he can be good in the things they would want. Like he's got a long way to go to prove he can be good in press. He's got a long way to go to prove he can be good in run fits. right? And discipline. There's like all the stuff that this defense seems to call for have been his failures as a player.
But-
And it's hard to know how he'll fit in unless something snaps and he just becomes the player he's supposed to be.
But there's no more scholarships on this team like they had with
Right.
Dable and Shane.
Right. So let's take him out of it for a second, right? From the other four, how confident are you in any of them actually having a starting job? I'm serious. Like, I mean, how confident are you? Like, is there anybody you're 100% confident is going to be a starting corner out of those four?
No.
And that's what we're talking about, right? Including Paulson Adebo.
Correct.
Did
not get off to a nice start there.
Remember, he's the only player on this team other than Dexter Lawrence who had he was holding out, and it was, I think the team understood that. Other than Dex, who was having a contract dispute and ended up getting traded, Paulson Adebo was the only player on the entire team that did not show up for that initial camp with John Harbaugh. And what was he doing? He was walking a beach in Thailand, putting up pictures on Instagram.
Yeah, he didn't know when it was, Sal. It's not like they tell you when these workouts are when you plan a vacation for any other time during the entire offseason.
I get everybody's like, he's starting. I understand that he's probably the best corner on the team. I get that, right? And they paid him a lot of money. All I'm saying is, I don't think John Harbaugh is looking at this team saying, I got to win a Super Bowl this year. I think he's looking at this team and saying, I got to change the culture this year and win a lot of games.
Yeah.
And this stuff, if you don't think it matters, I don't think you know the Harbaughs. It matters.
He didn't sound happy about it when he was being asked about it.
Right. I think it matters. Now, I just feel like, I did give crap to Charlie because he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. It was not mandatory. Why do we make a big deal? It's a big deal. There's mandatory and then there's like mandatory, right?
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't mandatory, but when you're the only guy who doesn't show up, who doesn't get a playbook, who doesn't meet the new coaches, it sends a pretty clear message. It's not a passive thing to do, right? To be the only guy who missed it. It's an active choice you made as the only person. It matters. It does matter.
I don't like the real world comparisons, but like people try to compare this all the time, the real world. And this is the example I guess I would use. It's like if you're at a company, there's a new owner or a new boss in, and he wants everybody to come, to this event after work for you for him to meet everybody. You don't have to go. It's after work. It's not work time. And you're the only one at the company who doesn't go. How do you think it's going to look for your upward movement at that company?
Right. Exactly. It doesn't mean you're going to get fired tomorrow, but it is a strike against you, whether people want to admit it or not. It is a strike against you, and they'll not say it publicly, but I guarantee you that did not sit well with Harbaugh or Jannard Wilson, who's trying to install his defense, and that's a veteran he's counting on. Guy's not there first day, right? So I'll throw in one more wrinkle in this discussion of Adebo, because I want to have this conspiracy theory out there, right? Just in case something does happen. And I'm not expecting anything to happen. I'm sure he'll be fine.
Here we go.
Ready? In the event that he is traded, hear me out. In the event they decide to trade him, he saves them $17 million in cap savings this year. 17 million,
which is exactly what nobody's trading for.
Well, that's true, but you and I talked about this. He's still a starting corner in the NFL. They have value, and let's just say the Giants go through all of this, and they decide we don't really want him here. We'd like to see if we can get something for him because we're comfortable with the other guys. And they talk to a team and they're like, I'm not eating $17 million. And the Giants say, we'll eat half of it. We'll eat 8 million or so. Send me a 4th round pick. Do you think that's possible? Where if they go through this and they feel comfortable with the other 4 guys being your, part of your rotation, would they consider moving Adebo for a little bit of cash relief and cap savings relief and the draft pick? Would you consider that?
I think what D-Kit said here would probably be a trade deadline move. First of all, it would take off some of the money that we have to deal with, because some of it would be played. I think there's concern about depth if you do that, and it's a little bit less of a concern if you're more towards the trade deadline, because then you've kind of been like, okay, you're a seller, and that's a little bit different. I'll give you one team to keep in mind. Obviously, it's gonna depend who gets hurt and things like that in that case. But in a situation, we're eating some money to move a guy. Maybe the Bears with Dennis Allen, his former head coach and their defensive coordinator over there. That's a team I guess I would keep an eye on.
The Kansas City Chiefs. They just lost all their corners, right? And they did draft one in Mansour Delane, but they still have a lack of DBs out there. Just again, I'm throwing it out there. I'm not saying they're going to trade Paulson Adebo right now. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I think anything is possible. I don't think anybody's secure right now.
Yeah,
they have to earn their jobs, and there's a possibility that he could be gone.
I would say it's a long.
Of course, it's a long shot, but but the point is, it's not impossible in this new regime.
No, I mean, we trade Dexter Lawrence.
That's my point. You just traded Dexter Lawrence. Anybody can be traded, right? That's my point. Like, why is Adebo off limits? Like, people are like, oh, you can't trade him. Well, you just trade Dexter Lawrence. Anybody can be traded.
Especially, and why did Dexter Lawrence get traded?
Right, because he didn't want to play here. And he didn't want to show up to work.
And what type of impression did Paulson Adebo give his first workouts?
Didn't show up to work when everybody else did, right? It's just, it's something to watch, right? Now, let's just assume for a second he does play and he is our starting CB1, which is the most likely outcome on the outside. Now you've got Newsome, Drew Phillips, and Colton Hood competing for the other two spots. I think Colton Hood can compete for either outside or inside. I really believe that. I think he's best on the outside, but he could play either. I'm not so sure that Drew Phillips is guaranteed that slot job. He was a third-round pick. He started largely based on scholarship, right? He's a good player. We're not hating on him. He's a perfectly decent player, but he's not great in coverage. He's a good nickel in run support. He's a good tackler. And I think his physicality and his mentality is something that the coaching staff will like a lot.
He'll have a role. He'll have a role regardless if he's getting the most snaps at the nickel spot.
Can you see Greg Newsome being him out for the job?
Sure, I could see it. I certainly could see Greg Newsome getting more snaps in nickel than Drew Phillips. I could see Darius Washington doing it too. I could see Darius Washington beat him out. He's a player that John Harbaugh likes a lot. He's a nickel guy. We took him out, but that's a guy who can kind of go nickel and safety. But yeah, one thing I want to say too, before we totally move off it, because we had a little bit of negative stuff there with Paulson Adebo. One thing to say, obviously it rubbed me the wrong way, like when he didn't show up to camp. When we brought in Denard Wilson, the number one guy who kind of sat there as a benefited from this to me was Paulson Adebo, because Deonte Banks is just, I know it makes sense that he would fit. They're both Maryland guys. He's a press guy fit. No, Paulson Adebo's a guy who struggled a lot, I think, because of him being played in a system that did not fit him. And I think that there is a good chance, I don't think an insignificant chance that we get the Paulson Adebo we paid for in this system.
No, I agree with you. I think, look, Paulson Adebo, what is he good at? He's physical and he's very good in press. What is he not good at is running full length of the field with guys, because I don't think, and some of that is coming off the leg injury last year, so maybe he can do it again. But I just think he's a guy that is best suited for what Denard Wilson would do, which is press the line of scrimmage and then run those zone principles behind him. I mean, obviously it's match principles, but still, I think he can do that well. I think he's an intelligent, really experienced DB who would fit in nicely in that.
And gets his
he gets his hands on the football. He has ball skills. I was just very, we talked about this. We're like, oh, this guy's going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the system. I was very disappointed, really disappointed that he didn't show up that day, because I thought that was a veteran they needed to show up, and he didn't show up that week. I don't know what to say. I think it sent a very clear message to everybody.
But he's there now. He showed up. He went there. Let's move forward. I'm that will be in the coach's head, but it does not. You're not ruling them out by any means.
All right. let's finish off with the safety room. Obviously, everybody thought forever that we were going to draft Caleb Downs. Didn't happen. Didn't draft a safety. I don't even know if they signed anybody in UDFAs, right? Well, no,
UDFAs. UDFAs.
No, I don't think they did. I can't remember exactly, but I don't believe so.
Remember.
They did sign Jason Pinnock, and they signed Washington, Ardarius Washington, who played both safety and nickel, right? But we've heard rumblings that they're very happy and very high on Tyler Nubin and Javon Holland, like meaning Denard Wilson is, and Joe Delisio is, that they like these guys. I have made the argument before, and I believe this, that if there was any group of players that was hurt the most by the last defensive coordinator, it was our safeties. I really believe that. Like, I think that Tyler Nubin was a fundamentally sound football player coming out of college. Like, that was his calling card. He was a good split field safety, wasn't a center field type safety, but a guy who could either play in the box or covering half the field, outstanding in run support, good ball skills, good at tracking the quarterback and watching his eyes and making plays on the ball and taking away, in zone. He was really good at that stuff. And it all fell apart here. And I think some of that was just the way they deployed him, where they expected him to be used athletically in a way that he wasn't capable of doing. And a lot of it was just that his confidence was shot and he just looked like a shot player.
Yeah.
Getting a new coaching staff, especially guys like Denard Wilson and Delisio, who are specialists in developing secondary players, I think that you might see a real resurgence from this kid this year.
Yeah. I think that, it's interesting what happened with Tyler Nubin. We were both big fans of him coming out, as you said. He's a guy who was an aggressive football player, get his hand on the football, smart. You just haven't seen any of it. You haven't seen anything like redeeming about him in the NFL. Everything that seemed like a good trade of his in college, he just completely disappeared. And I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't have the foot speed for the NFL. Well, I mean, to be fair, safeties don't really need that as long as your mind works fast. Maybe his mind has not worked fast enough. I don't know. Maybe he's just not good. That's a reality. But I agree. I want to see him with better coaching and see if that Tyler Nubin we liked is still in there, because it doesn't make any sense that none of this has appeared on the field. None of this. But I will say Javon Holland is a guy who I really like that signing when we made it. And I still think he's a really good football player. I don't think he was a bad football player by any means last year. I don't think he lived up to what we hoped he'd be, but I do think he was one of our better, at least secondary, probably guys outside of Flott. I thought he played well. And I think if you get him with a new coach, a guy who focuses on defensive backs, again, keep reiterating with all these guys, I really expect a leap from Javon Holland this year.
Yeah, I would expect the same. I think he's going to be a big player here. He should be. He's on a big deal, second year. We expect more. Pinnock was a good signing. He's a solid backup safety in that role. They also signed Elijah Campbell, who's more of a returner, but I think he'll make the team because of his return chops, or at least he can. And don't forget, they picked up Bo Braid last year, the kid out of Maryland, right? And Bo Braid was a kid that, again, I believe he played with Deontay Banks in Maryland, didn't he? And
yeah, I think so.
You know who else was a Maryland alum? Denard Wilson. There's going to be some connection there. So just watch out for him to potentially have a shot to make the team. And who am I missing? Oh, we should mention the backup corners. We didn't talk about them, but Corey Black, who we drafted last year, Rico Payton, who Joe Shane picked up, from the waiver wire, is still here. Bernard Converse, and then Art Green, the guy we haven't mentioned, Nick Jones is still here, and Thaddeus Dixon, who we signed as UDFA, and I think he was our first UDFA signing, and a guy the Giants put a 30 on. I think he has a good shot to make this team. Thaddeus Dixon, Belichick kid, right? Worked with Steve Belichick in Washington, then goes to work with Bill Belichick in North Carolina. Well coached, got hurt, so his year fell apart. But I think when he was not hurt, he was okay. And he's not like an elite speed athleticism guy, but he's a smart corner, and he's physical. And I think he plays the kind of like intelligent zone coverage corner. and can press that would be attractive as a backup for Denard Wilson. So just somebody to watch that I think could make a play for the roster.
Agreed. So one thing I want to ask you with with the conversation is, I think that we hope that Tyler Newman is right in front of me. Tyler Newman makes a step and becomes the player that we saw on tape, but there's a world that he is the same Tyler Newman we saw, and there is no scholarships anymore. We've talked about that, and
he gets benched.
Who are you looking at if he gets benched? Who are you looking at to take that spot?
I mean, it could be Jason Pinnock. It could be Bo Braid, right? It could be any one of these guys.
They could get Washington in there, especially depending.
I think Washington, he's a physical player, right? So if you're going to say that in a split field system in a and they start when they have two deep safeties, where they do a lot of post snap rotations, if they rotate into like cover 3 and and you have somebody like Holland rotating backwards into center field and the other safety kind of coming forward, I think Washington would be fine in that system, right? I think he would fit. I think he could cover center field, honestly, if you asked him to. I think he would be a useful player. It takes him away from the nickel as a pure nickel, but I think he could fit. Again, no scholarships. Tyler Newman's going to have to outcompete these other guys, but I go back to who he was in college, Monty, and there's no player that has me more confused.
Yeah, I agree.
Like I never loved the Tyler Newman pick for the upside, but I remember when we drafted him, we had him high on our board, and we're like, he's just a safe pick. He's a solid, safe, easy to pick safety that should be good.
It's like even with Evan Neal, like I'm confused how he's so bad, but his weaknesses showed up, and it's like, okay, it just ended up being in it. I don't know where these came from.
Newman was a smart safety. Like that's the thing. He was smart, reliable, really good ball hawk, took away half the field. I mean, he had issues with one thing I would say is he had some issues with run support in terms of the angles he would take in college. Sometimes he was a little overly aggressive and he would leave the outside runs. And he's had that here. So I don't know if that is just like coaching. That might just be a bad instinctive thing, right?
It's the wild thing is the only thing he did well his rookie year was run defense.
Right, and that got worse. But he has shown no ball skills, no instincts, nothing. Like he just looks lost, right? It looks like a guy who's lost out there. Sometimes guys get lost in the NFL, and it doesn't matter if it's coaching, they just don't recover. They could be shot, and we have to accept the fact that Newman just could be shot. Like he get out there, and when the bullets start flying, he's overwhelmed. He's not good, and that's it. But I would still make a decent bet that with better coaching and a better system for his play skills, I think that Newman is a bet for a guy that I think could emerge and really become what he was supposed to be coming out of college.
Yeah. But if he doesn't, one thing I will say is I'm a little bit intrigued by Jason Pinnock in this defense. And I'll say that because one thing that he did really well when he was here is his ability to blitz. His father is a D-line coach, and it's something that he really succeeded at. And I think that in Denard Wilson's defense, where you don't know where the pressure is coming from, I could see Denard Wilson like using this guy as a weapon, even if he's not as a starter. But if they have to use him, finding how getting the best of your player, using what they can do instead of what they can't do, I could see him having a big role there.
Yeah,
and he's been a starter, so
I'm going to bring up Bo Braid one more time. Maryland guy, drafted by the Ravens, and if you recall, they were upset that they lost him. They were trying to get him on their practice squad because they viewed him as a developmental safety that would eventually be like a contributor for them. And they wanted him to have one more year developing, and the Giants snagged him. They were upset about that. He worked with Denard Wilson. He worked with John Harbaugh. I wouldn't be surprised if he's very comfortable with their system and he looks better than other guys out there, right? So if anybody falters, I wouldn't be shocked if Bo Braid quickly emerges as like the next man up, to back up these guys to potentially compete for playing time. So I would just watch out for that with the connections to Harbaugh and Wilson. But I think overall, we talked about what the defense should look like. I think the safeties are an important part of that, but mainly because they are going to serve as, those zone defenders behind our corners in that match system. And you need guys who can have ball skills and guys who can be reliable run stuffers. But with the linebacking crew we have, I kind of feel like our safeties are mainly there to basically to hawk the football. That's their primary job here. And I think these guys can do it. I think that we can expect a big year from these two, meaning Nubin and Holland.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I don't know. We'll see, man. We'll see what the coaches do. See the coaches doing their job and coach these guys up.
So overall, on offense, we're predicting with this depth chart a run-heavy power football team that establishes their offense through the run, controls the clock, and utilizes Jackson Dart's playmaking ability and the diversity of the receiving room to put up points, right? We're a balanced attack that really focuses on running the ball a lot, and then Jackson Dart driving that football to produce explosives with all the different receivers he has. On the defensive side, we're expecting a D-line room that rotates a lot of guys. I failed to mention that before. The Ravens typically carry six defensive linemen, interior defensive linemen. So I would expect us to carry 6. They like to rotate them. And with the snap shares that you would expect from guys like Reeder, Harris, and others, nobody's eating 70, 80% of snaps. At best, they're getting to 60. So you're going to see these guys rotate, and try to keep fresh two gappers out there to stuff the run. Let those linebackers do their thing, destroying rushing lanes, taking the passing lanes with their length, and rushing the passer. I think you're going to see a lot of that. And I think the really important thing is in the secondary, just allowing our DBs to be physical at the line of scrimmage and the safeties to be ball hawks. I think that's fundamentally what this team's going to be built on. Run the football, create points by controlling the clock and then creating explosives off the run. And then on defense, take away the run and take away the football. I think those are the fundamental, like the building blocks of this team.
Yeah, and to build off what you said, the way I look at it, kind of we talked about the 3 levels. First level, a lot more base, like you mentioned, a lot more base than most teams. Going to be bigger, going to try to stop the run by having a bigger front than other teams have had. The second level, linebackers, that's the engine of your team. We went over that. They're going to be positionless. You're not going to know who's rushing from where, who's dropping coverage. That's where your team's going to live and die on defense. And secondary, you're going to have a secondary that's not going to give up easy catches. That's not something that they're going to allow to do. We got press coverage guys. They're going to put them in press, and they're going to live and die by the press to some extent, and make it difficult to get the ball out before these pass rushers can get to the quarterback.
Absolutely. I should mention before we close out the special teams, which are a big part of John Harbaugh teams, right? And he completely revamped the special teams unit. 3-year contract to Jordan Stout, probably the best punter in the NFL. It's going to matter, right? Like, field position matters. He's going to help us in that respect. They have a kicker competition, man, between Jason Sanders from Miami, Ben Sauls, who was here, and Dominic Savada. I think Savada is going to win that job, personally.
I think he will too.
This kid is
it's a good competition, though, man. Like, I mean, Jason Sanders has been a good player in this league. Ben Sauls really showed something for us last year. Like these guys are. It would not surprise me at all if we had 3 starting kickers in 2026 on our team right now.
Hilarious.
Maybe we get a trade for one of these guys to get a little Brand McManus type trade.
It just makes your life a lot easier if your punter can consistently pin the other team down, behind like inside their 20, inside their 10, make it harder for them to move the football. And if your field goal kicker is an asset and actually is able to knock down 60-yarders, right, which Zavada can do, I think it changes the way you approach the game when you can do that. If the points are there to be had, you just take them, right, instead of doing crazy things. So I think that stuff matters with the kicking game, and they've really put an emphasis in improving the kickers all around. They have new long snappers. I'm not going to I'll let Bobby Skinner continue to talk about that. I have no idea what they're talking about.
We got a Nepo long snapper.
Ben Man.
Nepo snapper.
Yeah, I heard them talk about him on Giants Nation the other day, and I'm like, well, they're like, well, he's not that great. Zach Snyder's probably doing the job. I'm like, all right, whatever. As
There you
long as
go.
I don't want to know who the long snapper is. That's my point. Like, you should never ever know who he is.
Respect Zach Diossi.
Zach Jordan is the holder as well. We should mention that he's a good holder. And then for kickoff, Jason Saunders. So I mentioned him, right? Like Jason Sanders is the kicker for now. But again, Zavada could take that job. Return game. Gunner is still on this team, dude. Is he still our punt returner, or are we looking at one of these kids they brought in?
I think they keep Gunner. I think they value special teams. Gunner showed more value than anybody thought he would have in that last game as a receiver. Like, that's something. That's a lot more than you can say for most of these return
All
guys.
Right. Well, between the kick returner and punt returner jobs, you got Gunner and Deontay Banks there now. But you brought in, Damon Bankston. This kid can play, man. He's going to compete for one of those jobs, I think. And then obviously you signed Elijah Campbell. And I think these are guys who are going to compete for those jobs. There's going to be open competition here too for the return jobs.
Yeah, especially kick return, because you have two kick returners out there, and it's not necessarily your punt returner that you're putting back there anymore.
Absolutely. It's going to be fun.
Somebody brought up
that. Yeah. He can compete. I think special teams, we always think of it as an afterthought because it's been so bad for the Giants. You don't want to think about it, but I really think you're going to see special teams be like a positive for this team now. The way John Harbaugh preaches that he was a special teams coach, he put an emphasis obviously in bringing in these guys, and field position is sort of one of them. We talk about money ball and looking for inefficiencies that take advantage of things that other teams are not looking at quite as aggressively to find that little competitive advantage. Field position and special teams is probably one of the bigger money ball areas that I would look at right now, because the way the NFL has changed the rules of kickoffs and everything, it makes it harder and harder for teams to find a competitive advantage there. So if you have a guy who can pin down the other team with punts, and you have good returners, and you have kickers who can actually control the kickoff and try to keep the team, behind the 30-yard line on kickoffs, you have a competitive advantage. And I think that's something they're going to focus on a lot.
I'll also say, it's obvious, but if you have a kicker with a big leg, I think it's more and more important with, a lot of this drive starting at the 35-yard line now.
Yeah. I mean, if you're basically 2 first downs away from points, that matters.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how I look at it, right? So if you're starting at the 35, you get 20 yards, and now you're at the opponent's 45-yard line. That's a 62-yard kick. If your kicker can hit from 62 yards, that definitely changes how you call plays. It changes how you go through things, and stacking points matters, right? Like drives that end up being negatives or zeros or turnovers, all of a sudden you start stacking field goals, 3 points here, 3 points there. That adds up. That's the difference between wins and losses. So I that's why I think Zavada is going to have an inside track here. The kid has a huge leg. And if he can prove he's consistent with that kicking in preseason and in camp, I think he's going to win the job, because we see him kicking 70-yard kicks.
Yep.
All right, man. Anything else before we close this out?
That's all I got, man. It's a good episode. A lot of good Giants talk.
As always, we appreciate you guys. Before you go, please hit the like button and subscribe to He's a Giant on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe, help us grow, share the episode, hit the like button. Follow us at He's a Giant Pod. Follow me at Queens_Guy. Follow Monty at MONTECRI5TO. Until next week, when we'll talk about, I don't know what, we'll figure something out. We'll see you then. Go Giants.
Go Giants.